Good evening, Dr. Serena, and a very happy new year to you and all of the audiences watching your amazing show, The Pendulum.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for having me again for the new year, and happy new year to everybody who is watching and will be joining us hopefully soon. I'm really excited about starting off uh, so early in the new year too with this first podcast because lots of new things are going to be happening. So uh, today, is kind of celebrating the Gregorian New Year, which is one type of New Year, and the Lunar New Year actually is on February 17th. And so it will be celebrating a different New Year. So depending on what calendar you celebrate and what type of astrology you follow, you might go from Western astrology, which is more of the Gregorian calendar, or you might go Vedic astrology, which follows more the lunar calendar as well. And so, interestingly enough, I'm going to be talking a little bit about Vedic and Western astrology tonight because, as you will see, there's going to be a slight change of how these formats are going to happen. You're still going to get topics with a lot of research and a lot of insights and information, as I have done in previous years. But I also wanted to kind of bring a new twist to things too. So let me talk first about an overview of kind of the different topics that are going to be involved for the remainder of the year. And so this kind of gives you an idea of what I'll be talking about each month, depending on the date. So again, it's going to still be a bi-weekly podcast every 2 weeks. But we are moving to Tuesdays at 7:30 Central Time now. So please mark your calendars for that. And so as you could tell, the different topics that will be available. And of course, it's tentative depending on, if other topics come up as interest or if something else is happening. These can always change. However, I just wanted to kind of give an idea of what to expect, so to speak. And there is going to be a slightly different format too, because I want to engage differently, and also just bring a little bit of different information into the mix too. And so, bringing more about talking about some more of the spiritual aspects that, I talk a lot about chakras in the last couple of years. And so I want to bring more of the spiritual aspects into it. And so every month at the beginning, I'll be doing a little bit more of birthdays and just doing a shout out to the general month of birthdays and talking about some of the insights related to birthdays. And this is going to be from both a Western and an Eastern perspective. And so looking at Vedic astrology and looking at Western astrology and kind of noting if there's any differences. I'm going to talk a little bit about the differences in a minute between the two, because there are actually specific differences between Western astrology and Vedic astrology, Indian astrology, which I found really interesting because they're quite opposite, which I found interesting. And then, of course, getting into the actual topic discussion for the month. And so, again, it'll be very similar to what I've previously done, giving you some research, talking about the actual topic itself, some insights. But what I'm going to be adding to this mix this time around is a reflection card. And what this is going to involve is an oracle card. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with oracle cards, but these are cards I'm going to be using. The wisdom of the shadow is what I'm going to be using. And basically, what it is that as I'm talking about these different topics, these are cards that are going to be near me. And I will choose a card and read the description of the card. And it's really meant for people that are listening as a reflection topic. So these are topics that you can reflect on in the evening, or whenever you listen to this podcast for the month, because it will relate to whatever the topic is. And that is part of what Oracle cards do. It is just meant to give you a little bit more insight, a little bit more reflection, something deeper to look into. And I really like these wisdom cards. I've been using them for a couple years now, and they go a little bit deeper than some of the things that may come up just in discussion or questions that you may have or questions that I may bring up. Sometimes they are very aligned. In fact, most of the time they become more aligned with whatever energy is present at the moment. And then the remainder podcast episodes that are there for the month, sometimes there's just going to be one extra podcast depending on the month, or there might be two. There are some months that have two additional episodes because of just the way the months are scheduled. And so those are going to be either panel discussions or guest speakers that are going to talk about the topic discussions because you don't always want to listen to me. So I want to bring in other people that can provide a different perspective than what I can provide. So that's the new format. Hopefully you will get more out of it. And if you ever have any questions or, have something specific, some feedback about it, of course, I'm very open to hearing about it and would love to hear about it as well. So of course, January birthdays, here is just some general information about people born in January. This is, of course, earth and air signs, so you have, and again, it's similar in both Vedic astrology and Western astrology. The only difference in terms of the signs are the birth dates, the actual date of birth. So they're slightly off. And so individuals who might be considered Capricorn in Western astrology might be considered a different sign in Vedic astrology. And so some of their um, characteristics and personality traits or something might be on the cusp of something different. But these are just some of the general overall characteristics, some of the more common traits that you might see related to earth and air. And so I wanted to also point out some of the differences between Vedic and Western astrology. And these are the same references that were listed in the first three, and you'll see the references at the end as well. But as you can tell from the screen there, Western and Vedic astrology actually work pretty well together for a lot of different reasons. And if you look at the screen, and I'll just kind of go through this, both of them have 12 signs. And really the only differences that exist is that they're kind of work in alignment with each other. So Western astrology tends to be more psychologically focused, whereas Vedic astrology tends to be more life path focused. So it's much more karma and dharma. It looks at people's past actions, past lives. It looks at what their duty, what their actions might look like. And it also really looks at the whole of the galaxy. So it's not just a fixed solar system, which is what the Western astrology looks at. It looks at the constellations that are fixed from thousands of years ago. Vedic astrology looks at how constellations and how the planets and how the galaxy in itself moves through time. And so it bases its information on the movement of the planets, of the stars, of the galaxy, whereas Western astrology does not do that. And so this is what creates a very different type of reading for individuals. And so if you were to go to somebody who knows Western astrology and reads your chart, you might get a very different reading than someone who is reading your astrology chart from a Vedic perspective. Western astrology is more sun-based. And so when you think about aspects of the sun, there are very different characteristics of the sun as opposed to the moon, which is Vedic astrology. Lunar, characteristics, moon characteristics are very different, which is what Vedic astrology is based on, as opposed to Western astrology. And also another big difference is that in Vedic astrology, your rising sign is considered much more important than your sun sign. And so your rising sign is kind of like your more ascendant, whatever sign is present at the time of your birth. And so in Western astrology, they consider it to be more the sun sign is more important, whatever that sign is. I still don't know what that means, but I can find out. And, you can always look it up too in Google. So this is new to me too. This is something that I'm getting more into as well. And as, we continue, or as I continue to present this material to you, it is something that will be dived more deeply into because it's part of a different path for me as well. But it is also going to be part of just figuring out birthdays and looking at, how things align with the different topics that we're going to be focused on throughout the year. So that gives you a little bit of information about the differences between Western astrology and Vedic astrology. So for tonight's topic for this month, because it is a new Gregorian calendar new year, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was reframing resolutions from an energy perspective. Oftentimes people start a new year, they have all these different goals that they want to do. And, they're really, bent on just doing something different. And sometimes what happens is that after a period of time, you start with the resolve to do something. And then after like 2 or 3 weeks, you start going back to old patterns. So this is kind of a different way of doing something different, is from an energy perspective. And so when we think about energy, this is really about looking at how energy stays in motion and how energy creates movement. And at the same time, when we consider energy, we don't really do anything with energy. We allow it to be present and we allow it to just be released, and it does its own thing. And so with that, this is more about looking at how can we reframe resolutions from an energy perspective and allow it to be present, to do it in a very intentional way, and then release it in the lunar calendar year. So for right now, the idea is if you decide that you want to do something different, what I'm going to encourage you to consider is for right now, clearing a space. There's 3 different steps to this. So tonight it's going to be more about clearing a space. It's going to be talking about, looking back at 2025. The next step would be looking at what your intentions are going to be. And then, in the lunar new year, it's going to be about releasing that into it, and then just letting that go. And so you're not really doing something per se like you would in terms of creating this kind of step-by-step action plan. It's more about allowing it to come into manifestation. And some of that is really more energetically speaking, as opposed to you physically doing something. So if you're willing to try this, what I'm going to ask you to do is to either, if you're sitting in a chair, to sit straight. If you're lying down or if you're standing, you can stand in place, whatever you would prefer to do. If you would like to close your eyes or keep them half closed, that's fine too. But just allow yourself to clear a space internally. So you're going to have a breath in and take a breath out and just release any tension that you might be experiencing. This is only about clearing a space for right now. And then the second step that you're going to do is that you're going to think back to your 2025 as a whole, the whole of the year. And as you're thinking about 2025, and keep breathing in and keep breathing out. So this is with a clear space. What comes to mind that was positive for you? It might be just a word, it might be an image, it might be a memory, it might be something that you experience in your body, but something that was positive. And then what comes to mind that was not so positive? And this may be something that you decide to do and write down even later, or even after this podcast, is that you might end up creating a list of things that were positive and not so positive. Maybe there were things that you wish you did differently or things that you want to do differently. But if you think back in 2025 as a whole, what was it, the crux of 2025? And from a number perspective, if you add up the numbers 20 and 25, it comes up to a number nine. And symbolically speaking, nine is actually a cycle of completion. And so for many people, it means that there are many things that might have been completed, or things that have been coming to an end, or things that have been let go of, or things that needed to be, tied up or wrapped up or let go of, or cleaned out or decluttered or ended or whatever. Nine is actually a sign of endings. Because a one, which is what 2026 is about when you add up the numbers, is a sign of new beginnings. And so 2026, from a numerical perspective, is a sign of new starts, is a sign of new beginnings. And so this is actually a sign of people may have had some experiences or may have had some breakthroughs or may have had some patterns that have cleared some things out or made some insights or revelations, if you want to call them that, where things became more clear to them about their life or relationships or anything really. And so it might be tied to new things that they want to do in 2026, whether it be the Gregorian calendar year or the lunar new year. So these might be things that you write down. These might be things that you energetically put in your mind or in your body. And then the next step, oops, is what do you want more of in 2026? So kind of think about what type of feeling you want more of, what type of experiences you want more of. And this is really about, from a chakra perspective. I talked a lot about chakras back in 2024 and 2025. The root chakra is about our sense of safety, our groundedness, our ability to be grounded. And so if we are stuck in this very much of a stress response, it's very hard to stay grounded. And so if you want more groundedness, if you want a more clear type of root chakra where you're able to stay rooted, because that's what the root chakra is about. And then it leads into oh my goodness, the second chakra, the joy chakra, which is where you experience joy. And now I'm forgetting what it's called, sacral chakra. This is and then your solar plexus, and then your heart chakra, anahata. So the idea is recognizing that when you come from this feeling space or this experience space, what is it that you want to feel more of in 2026? So kind of get a sense of that for a moment. Still breathing. What feeling, what experience? And then just take a deep breath from your core and hold it for a count of three. And then release it to a count of three. Whatever that feels like to you, whatever that experience is, all you're doing is just holding on to it and letting it go. So holding on and letting it go. And so just do that a couple times. right. So I am curious if anyone wants to share what that is like. I'm going to just stop sharing my screen for a moment. Hello. Anybody like to share what that was like if you tried it?
Serena, I just came on and got volume, so I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry. I,
Oh,
I
that's
I
okay.
had to leave for a while, but I just got back.
No worries. Thank you for letting me know. All right. Well, I'm gonna just take that as either you did not, you just got on board or still involved. So I'm going to read the Oracle card. This is our reflection card. This is the new piece that I'm going to be doing once a month, is pulling an Oracle card from a deck. I'm using the Wisdom of the Shadow. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Oracle cards, but these are different cards that are meant for reflection. And so basically what happens is that they are pulled from the energy of whatever's happening in the moment for the person or the energy of the group. And so the card that is pulled, I will read the description of it. And oftentimes the description of it usually resonates with the people that are present. This is something that I've experienced. And so it's something that I want to see how it works for the podcast. And so we're going to just try something new. So this is an interesting card to pull for the first one. This is shame. So I'm going to read what it says. And so thinking about 2025, this is what the description is. Let's see here. It is almost certain that at some point in our lives we have felt shame or will feel shame, humiliated, embarrassed, wronged, or made to feel like a fool, simply for being ourselves or sharing our truth. Feeling shamed is so powerful because it is tied to one of our fundamental desires as humans, belonging. Shame can bring along feelings of not being worthy of love, acceptance, and fear of being outcasted. To avoid feeling shamed, one might hide, reject, change who they are, lie about what they feel or have done, isolate themselves, or put on a false image to save face. Unfortunately, shame grows in isolation. Shame is one of those spiraling energies. When we feel shame, we hide. When we hide, we feel like we've done something wrong, so we hide more. We feel isolated, which makes us feel unworthy of love and understanding. Then we don't share what feels difficult, so we don't hear others talking about it. On and on we spiral. Consider courageous sharing vulnerability as an antidote to shame. When shame is shared in a safe space and held without judgment, it has nowhere to hide and it loses power. Think about any bits of shame you kept hidden. Feel how to create safer spaces for your shame to be shared and held. And so they offer some contemplations. And by the way, this Wisdom of the Shadow Oracle card is, I just want to give you the authors of this. This is by Jenny Han and Jessica Richik. I'm not going to pronounce her name correctly, and I apologize. So I'm just going to show you the names of these individuals. These are really artistically great cards. So the contemplations they offer is, what do I feel shameful about that spirals within me? How can I share my shame so it no longer can hide? And how do I shame others? It creates a shame spiral for the self. So that is a very interesting beginning. oracle card for the year, because shame is really a way that can start, what you don't want for the new year. So I'm curious if anybody has any thoughts about shame. That's a big one to start off with. Not one exactly I'm kind of just surprised I pulled that one. So I'm a little uncertain about that one, but there you go. What are you going to do? But I have talked about shame before, I think, in a variety of different contexts. So I don't know. Any thoughts about that? We've got about 4 minutes. Oh, somebody is driving right now. Thank you for letting me know. That does make it hard to participate. Well, I'm guessing that most people, at least from what I know, just for what I do for a living, want less shame in their life. And in 20, at least from what I know about how shame operates, it tends to be very sneaky and it comes up in a lot of different ways. And so I think part of the challenge for a lot of people when it comes to shame is recognizing how it operates in your life. It can easily creep up by, disguising itself. One way that I've seen it work in a lot of people is when I try to make like myself feel better by downplaying other people, that's a way that shame might be coming out. So if I am like making myself look better than other people, or I am comparing myself or comparing other people, that might be a way that shame is playing a role here. Or I'm saying that I'm better than other people. Comparisons really are about shame. That's one way that it comes out. Another way that shame may come out for a lot of people is that when people are involved in compulsive behaviors, so addiction, for example, substance use disorders, compulsive shopping, compulsive eating, compulsive behaviors, all those are different ways that shame gets covered up. Brene Brown talks a lot about shame and vulnerability. And there's extensive research about this as well. She has a great video, by the way, about the power of vulnerability. It's a YouTube video. And she presented at the Illinois Counseling Association. I think it was back in 2010. I got to meet her. And that was when her book, I think it was 2010, when her first book came out, The Gifts of Our Imperfections. And so she talked about in her research, she talks about how vulnerability is really, more powerful just by being vulnerable. That's what really leads to authenticity, is by being vulnerable. But yet we live in a culture that does not really allow that, so to speak, and also does not really know what to do with that, because it's more about, having an image and not being authentic. And so shame plays a really huge role in that. And so how do you go about being authentic and embracing, when you do feel shame? Because there is a certain amount of healthy shame that exists, but it's the toxic shame that is what it can be problematic. So shame, healthy shame is really about being human and recognizing, your limits. But toxic shame is when you start to hide and to destroy and be self-destructive. Those are the two big differences.
And it really affects your life then.
Yes.
Whereas the smaller level, let's say, you can move on from it
Yeah,
fairly
absolutely.
quickly and easily,
Absolutely. Because you recognize that it's
Yeah.
like, oh, whoops, like, okay, you might get a little embarrassed or like, okay, I made a little boo-boo, but
Yeah.
it's not enough to like really hold you back.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So that's the Oracle reflection card for the day and or for this month. And on our next podcast, we will have a panel discussion. I have a few people that will be joining me and talking about how they reframe resolutions. So, yep. So thank you so much for joining me, and we will see you all in 2 weeks. All right.
Thank you, Serena.
You're welcome. Thanks. Take care, everyone.